Well, hello everyone, and welcome to today's Meet the Expert session. We're very happy to have you all with us today to learn more about Dr. Sarah Evangega's career, expertise, and research. But before we introduce Sarah and our moderator today, I'd like to share a few comments and a few announcements too. So first, if you're not a cast member, we invite you to join our community. For students, if you're a student, memberships are free, and individual memberships start as low as $35. We also encourage you to nudge your organizations to become cast members, so we can grow our networks and broaden the conversation around science and technology and agriculture. So go to our website cast-science.org and become a member today, please. Next, subscribe to our YouTube channel if you're using YouTube today, or follow us on LinkedIn if you're watching us on LinkedIn. So doing so will keep you updated on all our upcoming projects, news, and events. And please follow us on all social media platforms at CAS Ag Science. So we want to make this session as interactive as possible. So if you have questions, please go to the chat on YouTube and LinkedIn and send us your questions during Sarah's presentation whenever you feel like it. And then at some point, we'll might bring some of you on screen. If you want to participate on screen on video, please let us know, and then we can bring you on video to ask questions to Sarah directly. So that will happen during the presentation, during the session. At some point, I'm gonna send you a link, and then you can join us online. So now is my pleasure to introduce you our moderator for today's session, Joseph Opoku Gakpo. Joseph is a PhD candidate in agricultural education and human science at North Carolina State University, and is deeply engaged in understanding how communication shapes biotechnology adoption and public perception. He's also an accomplished journalist from Ghana with over 15 years of experience and multiple international awards for his reporting on science, agriculture, and rural development. So, Joseph, thank you so much for helping us and guiding today's conversation. And I'll hand it over to you. Welcome.
Many thanks, Carlos. It's great to be here. I'm a big fan of casts. I believe that the work that you do, coordinating networks of experts to communicate science, that's very important work, and the world is better for that kind of work that you guys are doing. Um, Welcome everybody from across the world. I know Dr. Evanega has a huge fan base world over, from Africa, Asia, Europe, Southern America, and of course in the USA. So many thanks to you all for joining us. Let me quickly introduce Dr. Evanega. She's Vice President of Business Development at the Okanagan Specialty Fruits, the company that developed the Arek apple and that continues to lead in fruit tree biotechnology to improve our food system for the betterment of the people and the planet. Prior to joining OSF, she served as the Director for Stakeholder Communication at the food tech startup Pairwise. Dr. Evanega received her PhD in plant biology from Cornell University, where she continued on as a faculty member until 2022. And while at Cornell, she worked in international agriculture, leading a range of agricultural development projects to contribute to a more nutritionally secure future for all. Um, Dr. Evanega was the founding executive director of the Cornell Alliance for Science, a global communications and advocacy platform working to ensure access to agricultural innovations. And that's why I first got to know Dr. Evanega. I've known her for about a decade now. At the Alliance for Science, she brought young people from all over the world to study at the Ivy League institution in Ithaca that equipped hundreds, if not thousands, of young people with great skills to do extraordinary stuff that's changing the world and making the planet a better place. That's how I first came to the USA. And so, Dr. Evanega, we are all grateful to you for creating that opportunity for us all. Dr. Evanega is a passionate communicator about agricultural biotechnology and delivered a TEDx talk in 2023 on the role of CRISPR in food and agriculture. She maintains an adjunct faculty appointment in plant breeding and genetics at Cornell. She is the 2021 Boiler Crest Communications Award winner, and in 2022, she received the Marie Clara Leadership in Science Public Service Award from the American Society of Plant Biologists. She holds a BA in biology from Reed College, and she enjoys life in the Finger Lakes with her three children, and is originally from a small agricultural village in Illinois. Dr. Evanega, many thanks for joining us on what is most likely a cold Ithaca day. Um, we are ready for your presentation on the success of bioengineered fresh foods in the marketplace and the future of CRISPR technology in agriculture. So take it away.
Well, thank you, Joseph. It's so nice to have the opportunity to work with you. And I think you sent us some sunshine in Ithaca today. I saw blue sky earlier. So great to be here. And thanks to Carlos and the CAST team for the invitation to engage on a couple of my favorite topics. So excited to jump in on a conversation around bioengineered foods, highlighting some of the exciting products that are already in the marketplace in the produce aisle, as well as thinking about the future and what CRISPR technology will offer us as we continue to innovate in this space. I think Carlos is going to bring up some slides, and the CAST team asked me to start off with a little bit of background and detail on my journey and how it was that I started in tiny town Illinois, and today am at Okanagan Specialty Fruits, advancing innovation in apples. So I will take you on a little journey. So I, as Joseph said, went to a small liberal arts college in Portland, Oregon, Reed College. And, you know, when I went to Reed, I was coming from a very small rural school in Illinois, didn't have a lot of exposure to different career paths, and had a really great biology teacher. So I thought, well, I guess I'll major in biology, and really had no notion of becoming a plant scientist when I got to college. But that all changed my junior year when I walked into a plant physiology class as an elective, and I really fell in love with plant science. The course was taught by a plant biochemist. I was so excited to see what I was learning in chemistry, you know, appearing in my plant physiology class. It was really an exciting synergy. And it was an exciting time in plant science. This was, I'm going to date myself, but that's okay. It was the year 1997 when I entered that class. And that was, actually, it was 1986. And it was the first year that there was a large scale commercial planting of a genetically modified crop. And so all of us studying plant science were really excited about this company, Monsanto, and these new tools that they were using to innovate. The next year, in 1997, the year I was working on my thesis and gearing up to graduate, of course, was the year that the virus-resistant genetically engineered papaya became freely available to farmers across Hawaii. And so it was a super, super exciting time to be in this field. And we were very excited about what these tools of genetic engineering could do for our field of plant science. And so with that excitement, I decided to go to graduate school and study plant biology, continue to study this exciting field that I just discovered. Found my way east to Cornell University, where I began my program in plant biology. And it was a few years into that PhD that I really, you know, I was enjoying working in plant biochemistry, trying to decipher signal transduction pathways in plants, brassica in particular. But it was during that time that we started to see the so-called GMO debate sort of unroll. And, you know, we were kind of scratching our head thinking, like, what happened? What happened to these tools that we were so excited about? How did they become demonized? How did they become, you know, so-called GMOs? How did they become a household name? And so a few years into my PhD, I decided that, you know, I really wanted to work more at the intersection of plant science and society. And so I took a pause, left the lab bench, and decided to do that, to pursue an interdisciplinary PhD in this field and try to answer the question, like, what happened? Why was it that this technology that held so much promise wasn't living up to its potential and was being sort of demonized in the press? And it was during this time that I discovered CAST as someone who was newly interested and engaged in the field of science and agricultural communication. So grateful for that exposure to CAST at that time. For my PhD dissertation, I studied the controversy around genetically engineered crops, specifically focused on the virus-resistant papaya. And if we look at the next slide, we can sort of see this map of the world that is emblematic of the fact that, Dennis Gonzalez, who had been a faculty member at Cornell when he developed the virus-resistant papaya, had success in Hawaii, saved the industry there. But in the meantime, researchers from all over the world had gone to his lab with their strain of the virus and their favorite variety of papaya and tried to replicate the work for their own country's farmers. And in no case was that technology actually implemented in the end. And in no case was that due to the science or to a lack of science, but it was fully due to politics and social issues. And so those are the kinds of questions that I wanted to better understand so that we could move past this controversy around this very important tool set. I finished my PhD and then went on to do a lot of work in agricultural development, joined the faculty at Cornell, and worked on some big global projects that brought together big collaborative consortia to try to work toward a more food secure future. And that was a really exciting time for me to be able to work at the intersection of agriculture and ag development. But I always sort of felt like I wasn't really working in biotechnology anymore, and I really wanted to sort of get back into that space. And so if we go to the next slide, this is now the we're further into the 2000s. The GMO debate has sort of kind of come and gone, or it felt like it was starting to wane. And in 2013, a couple of different things happened that made me think, maybe we're on the verge of a tipping point and we're going to be able to overcome this hesitancy or this controversy around genetically modified crops. It was 2013. I remember it was a cold Ithaca January morning when I heard that this former Greenpeace activist had made a public apology in a speech at the Oxford Farming Conference. That, of course, was Mark Linus. And I thought, wow, maybe the tide is turning. That was also the year that Amy Harmon published 3 beautiful pieces in the New York Times that were wonderfully written, science-informed, and really told the real story on how this tool can really benefit people and the planet. And so I felt like we were on, the point. We were at the point where if we just had a little bit of a push, we might be able to move beyond this GMO debate and be able to use these tools to innovate. And so that was what really inspired us to build the Alliance for Science. We can go to the next slide, which is the initiative that Joseph spoke of in the introduction. And this is where Joseph and I first met. This was a communications and advocacy organization that we grew out of Cornell to really ensure that everyone around the world has access to these innovations in order to feed their people, become economically vibrant, whatever the case may be. And I think the secret sauce to the Alliance for Science was that we really were quite inclusive. We brought together people, champions from all walks of life, all corners of the world. And what united everyone, all of us, was that we all really had this fire in our belly. We always used to like to say, to ensure access to these innovations. So priests, journalists like Joseph, young lawyers, young farmers, really all walks of life, but all really focused on improving perception of biotechnology, improving the enabling environment, the regulatory environment for biotechnology around the world. So that was the Alliance for Science. It still exists. It's a very active organization now under the leadership of Dr. Sheila Ochagboju. And if you're not members of the Alliance for Science or not following them on social, I encourage you to do so. At some point, post-pandemic, I thought, I've been in academia for a long time. I think the Alliance for Science would benefit from new leadership. And I think that, I've spent a lot of years talking about other people's products. I've spent a lot of time advocating for these applications, and I really wanted to join a team that was actually using these tools to develop a product that was going to impact people positively. and improve lives. And so I decided to jump ship from academia and join a startup. As Joseph mentioned, initially joined Pairwise, innovating in fruits and vegetables there. And then last February, I had the opportunity to join Okanagan Specialty Fruits, where I serve as the VP for Business Development today. So it's been an exciting journey. And it's especially been exciting to see that, now we're starting to see some really exciting products come onto the marketplace. We can go ahead and advance the slide. That I think, really do bring forward direct benefits to consumers. And for so long, we've talked about how, we need products that have direct consumer benefits. And today we see that we see these great products appearing in the produce aisle. So whether it's the Pink Glow pineapple that you may have seen in supermarkets, this initially launched in 2020. And now we see pink pineapples in most supermarkets all around the world. They initially launched direct to consumers with online sales, which made sense for them at the time. And I think sales have gone quite well. Just from 2022 to 2023, you see a doubling of sales of pink pineapple. So it's exciting to see this really attractive option in the produce aisle. We also see now the purple tomato on supermarket shelves. They're now in 3 major retailers. Last year, Norfolk Healthy Produce sold 13,000 seed packets of these purple tomatoes, really engaging home gardeners and being able to produce their own bioengineered purple tomatoes. So very exciting. And I think purple tomato sales just went on sale December 2nd. So in fact, you can go online and order your own purple tomatoes now. And then, of course, our own story of Arctic apples, Okanagan Specialty Fruits, where I work with the developer of the Arctic apple. We were one of the first products to come onto the marketplace. I think the real hard launch was in 2018 with our first varieties of non-browning Arctic apples. And if we look back today, now we can say over 100 million servings served. So it's happening. There are these success stories in the produce aisle now that can further tell the story of the impact that bioengineering can have beyond the row crop stories that we've heard for a number of years. Next slide, please. So I thought I'd tell you a little bit about our Arctic apples, because it is a nice example of bioengineering and really sort of sets the stage for how we transition from bioengineering in some cases to using the tools of gene editing, which we'll talk about later on in the presentation. So Arctic apples, essentially what we've done is we've taken existing varieties of apples that we know consumers love, and we've turned off the gene for polyphenol oxidase, which is responsible for enzymatic browning. And the result is that you get an apple that when you slice it or when it's bruised, it doesn't brown. So these apples have a huge sustainability benefit. In fact, our company was really founded on a commitment to reduce food loss and food waste in the apple industry. And that's something we're really proud of. Of course, food loss and food waste is a major challenge. It contributes 8 to 10% of global greenhouse gas emissions and costs us about $1 trillion each year, according to the World Resource Institute. So this is a major problem that we're able to use biotechnology to try to help solve. It also presents a number of benefits for other actors across the supply chain. So not only does it benefit growers due to reduced bruising during picking or in bins, but also obviously presents a number of benefits to end users. So in the context of food service, where most of our apples are sold, we present a huge labor savings. People don't have to slice. We sell all of our apples as sliced or diced apples. And so those chefs in kitchens don't necessarily have to chop apples. They can take our bulk bags and save on labor. And of course, they also present an extended shelf life of 28 days on our sliced and diced apples. So huge benefits for consumers, and really has the potential to lift the apple industry, in that we can essentially do now to apple what the carrot industry has benefited from in terms of baby carrot processing innovation. So we're able to bring fresh apple into the fresh cut industry in a way that really will benefit and lift the entire apple industry. Next slide. So today we have 6 Arctic varieties developed and approved. Arctic Goldens, Arctic Grannies, Arctic Fujis are all commercially available. So we have a red skin, a yellow skin, and a green skin apple. Next year, we'll have Arctic Galas commercially available, and we also have Arctic Pinks and Arctic Honeys in the pipeline. So an exciting portfolio. We can go to the next slide. Just want to note that Okanagan Specialty Fruits is a fully vertically integrated fruit tree business, which is a little unique. We do all of our science. We develop all of our engineered apple trees, and we also grow all of our own trees in our orchards in Washington State. Near our orchards, we have a state-of-the-art storage facility where our apples are stored in controlled atmosphere. And then we have a state-of-the-art processing facility on that same campus where our apples are sliced and diced and shipped out to consumers. And so it's a very tightly integrated system that reduces waste and reduces our carbon footprint in efficient ways. And then, of course, we're selling premium products, not only our sliced and diced apples, but we have a new, very exciting hard cider business. We're making an exquisite hard cider out of our Arctic apples, and it's a really special drinking experience. The non-browning nature of the apples also makes a very exquisite juice, and then that can be made into a very clean hard cider. So if you haven't checked out our Endless Orchard webpage, I encourage you to do so. This is a new venture and really helps our company continue to advance our goal of driving towards zero waste. Next slide, please. Okay, so what are we learning about consumers? What we know is from our own data at OSF is that triple the consumers think that our non-browning biotechnology is a good idea versus those who think it's a bad idea. And these are data actually that were collected before the pandemic. And as I have put in the last bullet on this slide, many studies show that there's actually increased favorability since COVID vaccine development. So because people learned so much about biotechnology across the pandemic and waiting in anticipation of our vaccine being developed, people learned a lot about biotechnology, and they learned to appreciate the benefits that biotechnology bring to people everywhere. Even in the EU, concern about GMOs has more than halved from 2010 to 2019. Again, this is even pre-pandemic, so I would expect those numbers to be even more dramatic today. And we see increasingly positive press about GMOs. This picture here in the bottom left is from the New York Times Magazine. A beautiful cover story titled Learning to Love GMOs, which highlighted really all of the beautiful crops that bring benefits both to farmers as well as consumers. So we're definitely in a different era where people are have much improved attitudes towards GMOs, and they're eager to receive more products that have those direct benefits for consumers, like the pink pineapple, the purple tomatoes, and the non-browning apples that we talked about earlier. We can go ahead to the next slide. Okay, but we're also going to talk about new emerging technologies like CRISPR. This, of course, is another form of biotechnology that is sort of post bioengineering. And it stands for clustered, regularly interspaced, short palindromic repeats. And if we go to the next slide, we'll talk more about what CRISPR is. Hopefully you'll get that acronym definition at your next trivia night. So genome editing is exciting because it's a way to change in a very smart and directed way the DNA sequence of a plant or an animal or really any organism. And so it can be used for all kinds of purposes. There are different forms of genome editing, but the CRISPR-Cas system is among the most commonly used. We just launched a paper about genome editing through CAST, one of their issue papers last spring. And this figure on the right here was one of the figures we developed in that paper to help people illustrate some of the most commonly pursued approaches using CRISPR. We can go to the next slide and see a little bit more about that paper. It was called The Applications, Benefits, and Challenges of Genome Edited Crops. It's freely available on the CAST website. And again, as the title indicates, we really tried to jump into, how is this technology being used today? what are the actual applications that we see out there? What are the benefits? How does this technology bring forward benefits both for growers as well as consumers? And what challenges are still out there that are going to need to be overcome in order to fully realize the benefit of this tool and these technologies? So if we move to the next slide, in that paper, we talk about some of the applications and the examples of successful products that have already been developed through genome editing. The Calyx high oleic soybean oil being one of the first, and this one was developed using the tools of Talons. And then, of course, Corteva's waxy corn, which was another early product. And then the high GABA tomato developed in Japan. This has high levels of an amino acid called GABA that's thought to have sort of a relaxing effect and may help to decrease blood pressure and have other health benefits. And then, of course, in the US, the first product to hit the market was Conscious Greens, developed by Pairwise. And this was a greens that had 17 copies of the morosinase gene silenced, such that you didn't have that kind of off-putting pungent flavor of mustard greens. So these are 4 products that have actually hit the market. I will say that none of these products are available in the US today for various reasons. But I think we're going to start to see in the next 5 years a real flurry of innovations coming to the market that have been developed using gene editing. It's still early days, and I know there's so much being worked on right now, so many exciting products in the pipeline that will be coming out soon. So we can go to the next slide. Just to sort of, explore what those products might be. Genome editing is really opening the door to all kinds of new innovations. And as someone who is, at a company that works in specialty crops, it's an especially exciting time to be working in specialty crops. This tool really helps us accelerate our breeding goals in specialty crops. So we might see products coming online that have interest to consumers, different colors, improved flavor, a lot of applications of non-browning, whether it's non-browning mushrooms, non-browning apples, non-browning avocados, increased vitamin content, all kinds of consumer traits coming forward. And also, of course, many traits that are going to be of great benefit for growers as well as for the planet. So reduced need for water, reduced need for inputs, chemical inputs, because these plants can be inherently engineered to be disease resistant, longer shelf life to make their way to consumers, different stature to be able to stand up to erratic weather events, for example, the short corn pictured there. So all kinds of innovations that can benefit both consumers as well as growers, people, and the planet. And I think the most exciting thing here is being able to combine these traits so that it's not an either or, a consumer trait versus a grower trait, but we can have our cake and eat it too. We can have traits for consumers in the same material that we have traits for growers. So it's an exciting times. Next slide. Okay, so just to give you a little bit of a glimpse of how we're thinking about these new tools of genome editing at Okanagan Specialty Fruits, we're continuing to work in fruit tree crops, apples, and other fruit tree crops. We're actively working in disease resistance, particularly in apple, and thinking a lot about other novel consumer traits, color, increased nutrition. You can think about different types of traits that might be attractive to consumers in fruit tree crops. And then thinking a lot about the important role of modifying plant architecture to solve some of our biggest problems in the specialty crop industry. So if we can change the plant architecture of a crop, we're able to make it more amenable to automation, for example, which would really help solve our labor crisis, for example, as well as make our plants more resilient in the face of climate change. So some really exciting opportunities that we're thinking about at OSF, and I know there are a number of other companies out there also really excited about the role that this technology is going to play. Next slide. So speaking of exciting. Actually, at the top of the hour, when we launched this webinar, there was an announcement that came out that announced our new partnership with Prevar. So this is kind of hot off the press. Hopefully by the time this webinar is over, you can go online and look at our LinkedIn page and other places on the web to see this announcement that we are partnering with Prevar and Plant Food Research in New Zealand to leverage our experience bringing a biotech product to market, leveraging our experience working with these tools of biotechnology to help improve their fantastic germplasm that they've developed to improve pest and disease resistance, tackle food waste that we know we can do well, and think about how we can use these tools to enhance nutritional benefits. So you're the first on your block to hear this news. It's very exciting, and it just really shows, how we're going to increasingly see exciting global collaborations to really elevate these tools and use them to advance our food system. And with that, we'll go to the next slide. And yes. So I just want to end with a little note about, what are consumer attitudes? How much do people know about gene editing? And the reality is, most people don't know very much about genome editing. But when you tell them about it, the majority are excited about it. And they're particularly excited about it if they say that, one, it can make food more nutritious, so can offer them that personal nutrition benefit. And two, can make food production more environmentally sustainable. And people typically cite reducing pesticide use and reducing water use as some of their top priorities, or, those two goals align most with their sustainability values. And so I think, we're largely over this hesitancy to biotechnology, whether we're talking about bioengineering or CRISPR and gene editing. And, sure, there's still a few, loud folks out there in the corner. But for the most part, I think people want to embrace technology that's going to help us lead healthier lives as well as protect our planet. And so with that, I'm going to open it up to a conversation, and I hope that we can have a dynamic and engaging half an hour moving forward. Thank you. Over to you, Joseph.
Thank you, Sarah. That's a very comprehensive presentation there. We've already gotten a number of our folks in the audience throwing in questions. Let's begin with one from Kenneth Monjero. Great talk, Dr. Sarah. My question is, how can such research be adopted in other regions without repeating same research? And what do you see as barriers to the technology in different parts of the world?
Sure, that's a great question, and thanks, Ken, for that. Great to see you here on the webinar. Absolutely, much of what we learn in one cultivar or one variety or even one species can be applied to another. So, for example, you could, take the PPO gene that we've silenced in apple and, put that into a tropical species to make it non-browning. So certainly there's a lot of shared learning across species. I think the important thing is to ensure that when we're introducing a new variety, that it is one that is locally adapted. We need to make sure that that we're still doing all the basic plant breeding, right, to make sure that we're introducing varieties where they can thrive. And certainly, Joseph, you know a thing or two about that, as I know that you've studied the case of BT cotton in Burkina Faso thoroughly.
Yes, obviously there are lessons there, even as more of these emerging tools come up, and so on the back of that, then beyond just trying to then ensure that species are locally adapted, what do you think the opportunities are for different parts of the world? You showed us very great examples of what's happening in the US with the CRISPR gene editing tool, for example. But then in Africa, in Latin America, in Southeast Asia, what kind of opportunities possibly exist to then extend some of these innovations there?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's really exciting to see how much leadership Latin America has taken in this realm. Argentina was one of the first to release a regulatory framework around, or to determine how they were going to regulate gene-edited crops, and did launch a very simple, straightforward, and facilitative framework. And I think that increasingly, well, and I should add, other countries across Latin America have done the same, and increasingly countries across Africa, as they think about, well, how are we going to regulate or not regulate gene-edited crops, are looking to South America as an example. So certainly there's a lot of leadership in South America, a lot of interesting crop development there using these tools. But we see examples all around the world, whether it's, high iron, high zinc rice in the Philippines, whether it's, gene edited sweet potatoes in Ghana, nutrient rich bananas in East Africa. There's so many examples of how these tools are being applied across lower and middle income countries, as well as countries like the US. So it really is a fantastic tool that's being embraced all around the world. It seems like almost every week there's a headline of another country that's really changing their regulatory system to be able to embrace the tools of gene editing to ensure a more sustainable agricultural future.
Does the technology provide any advantage that startups and small businesses could possibly take advantage of in the light of that larger concern that with GMO specifically, the regulatory barrier and the high cost of trying to then get products onto the market has been one of the drawbacks over the years?
Yeah, and that's where the regulatory environment and ensuring that that environment is an enabling one is so important. If we look at USDA data that was launched just about a year ago, we see that the number of applications from big biotech companies using legacy regulations on, so-called GMOs, it was about 75% of the applications, or greater than 75%, were from large multinational companies, very few from small startups, and very few from academics. And after the regulations were revised and made more enabling, and now we have sort of different categories for gene-edited crops, we really see a dramatic shift. And now we see many more startups and small companies submitting those applications. We see increasingly more academics and public institutions submitting applications. And so that innovation environment has changed dramatically over the last 5 years. And that's really due to an improved regulatory environment and access to these new exciting tools where you can really accelerate breeding in many more crops. It's not just being used for row crops. It's exciting to see startups working across different specialty crops and minor use crops. So it's a whole new playing field.
But then beyond the bit about regulation, in terms of the process of crop improvement itself, when you compare gene editing to, let's say, GMOs or even conventional breeding, is it a much simpler process? Is it a less complicated tool, which is why there's huge interest in gene editing specifically, you think?
Are you talking about scientifically or regulatory wise?
Scientifically, so beyond the regulation, but scientifically, yes.
I think the answer to that is it depends. There's a lot of applications of genetic engineering that we know how to do really well. And we're going to want to continue to use the tools of genetic engineering to continue to innovate. So I think from a scientific perspective, the answer is always it depends. You use the tool that's going to solve the problem the most quickly, right? And all of those tools are so important. So, there's a number of companies that are, still using the tools of genetic engineering because it's the right tool for the job. And when we want to introduce genes that are from other species, we're going to need to, potentially continue to use the tools of genetic engineering in many cases. And to be honest, the distinction between a genetically engineered crop and a gene-edited crop, that is becoming increasingly philosophical. There's just a lot of gray area. And so that's where, the regulatory environment comes in, and they're still, I think, struggling to kind of parse out that gray zone.
On the back of that, the products that you did mention are under development currently, and said that in the next 5 years or so, it's likely that we'll see a lot of them out there and available. My question is, what's holding the process in terms of getting some of these varieties that have been developed out over the last few years?
Yeah. Well, science takes time. You want to start with great germplasm, right? And so you need that fundamental plant breeding, and then doing the editing and then regenerating. Oftentimes, the plants are resistant to the technology. We're figuring all of this stuff out for the first time, right? How do we gene edit in cherry? How do we gene edit in lettuce? How do we gene edit in all these different crops? The science does take time. We have to remember that it hasn't been too many years since those first papers on gene editing were released. So I think it's still early days, but certainly it's exciting to see so many different companies, small companies, large companies, academics, the CG centers working in the international space, so many different kinds of organizations working on a range of different crops, a range of different traits using these tools. I think there's in our CAS paper, we cited over 40 different crops in 25 different countries being worked on only in agronomic traits, for example. So there's just a lot of innovation happening right now. And that's really what we didn't see so much of using the tools of genetic engineering in the early days with those really strict, restrictive regulatory environments. We, in that first generation, we really, saw 99% of all the genetically engineered crops out there were just 4 crops, right? 50% of it's soybean, a lot of 30% maize. We've got canola and cotton up there, and those 4 crops compose 99% of all the genetically engineered crops out there. And then they're carrying 2 traits or combination of those 2 traits, herbicide tolerance and insect resistance. And so in that first generation, we really didn't see that many crops benefiting from the tools, and we didn't see that many traits coming to the fore. And that's a very different landscape today.
Interesting. Speaking of the landscape, young people are one of the most very important group when it comes to the demographics as far as this conversation around biotechnology is concerned. What are you hearing from them on these emerging tools like genome editing?
Yeah, it's a very different conversation with young people today, Gen Zs, millennials, than we might have heard from generations of the past. And so it's exciting times. One study that was released indicated that 77% of Gen Z adults are interested in having food developed with technology, for example. So there's this embrace of food developed with technology, whether it's in the alternative protein space, whether it's in fresh produce. So young people today are interested in technology. They're interested in how it shows up in their food, and particularly if it's going to align with their sustainability values. So I think, climate change and people's concern over climate change, particularly young people, has been a real driver in, the shifting attitudes towards technology and food. We know that we need better ways to produce our food. We know that we want to have a healthier food system. And so if we're going to achieve that, we've absolutely got to adopt new tools in order to get there. And so I think that's really shifted attitudes all around the world. And certainly that's climate and concerns over climate change has been the key driver in Europe, for example, as they revise their position on some of these technologies and their regulatory frameworks.
And do you get the sense that CRISPR would be able to then meet the expectation, as in the application of the technology, be able to meet the expectation, the huge expectation that the increased deployment of these tools will eventually help tackle challenges like climate change? Because a bit of the criticism has been that there's a lot of hype around innovations like genome editing, and there's the need to temper the optimism with with a bit of caution, so that then there isn't a case of people becoming disappointed in the next few years, and that further deepening the kind of dampening the kind of confidence that people have in science and innovation.
Yeah, well, I always think people should get excited about plant breeding, Joseph. So no, but it's a fair point, because again, like your question, when are the products coming, right? Why are they not on the market yet? I think, it's hard to help people appreciate that science takes time. And so in the meantime, it is important not to overhype. But I think that one of the exciting things is that while we're all talking about CRISPR and getting excited about this new tool, here we have all of these new innovations that were made using bioengineering showing up in the marketplace. And so the timing is actually kind of interesting, because just as we're talking about CRISPR, now we have pink pineapples and purple tomatoes and Arctic apples at our fingertips. And so maybe we can temper our enthusiasm about CRISPR and start enjoying some of the bioengineered crops that have shown up in the meantime. And those will keep us satisfied until those edited crops come online. But certainly, I mean, if you just think about the news this week, I mean, we've heard for the last several days about the increasing price of coffee, right? By some measures at an near all-time high. And that's absolutely due to climate change and due to increased drought. So, this is a very real example of how these climatic constraints are going to impact our lives at a very personal level. If we don't have our coffee in the morning, there will be hell to pay, right? Or maybe the tea industry will go wild. But this is one of those moments where I think it's a learning moment, and people can really appreciate the importance of these tools of plant breeding to continue to be able to build more climate resilient crops in the face of climate change.
Okay, let me remind our audience that you can keep your text coming. Those of you who would want to jump on the call and ask your questions as well, just let us know, and then we'll want to have you as much as possible involved in the conversation. Sarah, as we prepare to round up, I want to talk about the kind of work that you do, moving a bit away from the science bits. And I know there are a number of students who would be watching this, and some may be interested in doing other things, probably interdisciplinary beyond what they are learning in school today and all. But then, first of all, start by telling us about your role as Vice President Business Development at Okanagan Specialty Fruits. What does that involve? What exactly do you do?
Yeah, well, the way I think about business development at OSF is sort of fourfold. One, we're interested in selling our apples and making them available to more consumers out there. So we sell the majority of our apples in food service because they're so well positioned for food service with their added convenience benefit, their extended shelf life. So we'll continue to grow that number beyond the millions of apples we've already sold. I also think about our goal as a company to put apples in more places, to be able to drive consumption of healthy fruits and vegetables, to be able to make new products out of apples, to be able to leverage their non-browning nature in order to, innovate an apple in interesting ways. So developing new apple products, and then to really help drive our company goal towards zero waste. So we are always looking for ways to reduce waste and find pathways for our byproducts. So one of the things that you might not appreciate, Joseph, is when we slice our apples, we're essentially reducing the freight weight by 20 to 30%. So we don't ship out whole apples. We take our apple from the orchard, we put it in storage. When we're ready to serve it to a customer, we pull it out, we slice it, and ship those apples out in their ready-to-eat form. And so we're not shipping around the part of the apple that no one will ever eat, that core, right? And so we're able to control what happens to that core and make sure that it's used in the most environmentally responsible way. And so thinking about new pathways for disposition product, for example, is a really exciting area of business development. And then finally, and I think this is the part of business development that is really highlighted in the press release that I mentioned earlier in my presentation that came out today. We have a tried and true platform, a fantastic R&D team who has succeeded in developing developing successful products using the tools of biotechnology. And we would love to partner with more organizations to use those tools to help solve your problem and your favorite crop and your trait of choice. So being able to partner with Prevar, for example, to bring exciting new improvements to their already fantastic germplasm is another really important area of business development. That's one I'm particularly excited about.
Well, other young people who may be interested in taking up jobs or taking up careers in the biotech space and probably may or may not have agricultural, biotechnology, or even biology-focused backgrounds. As we begin to wrap up on the conversation, would you have any advice for such young people going forward?
Yeah, I think, as I look back on my career, one of the pieces of advice that I would give a young person today, or that I would give my younger self, is take risks while you're young. Go ahead and launch that startup, or, do something daring that might be a little bit risky. Do that while you're young. Do it before before you have kids to feed, right, and take care of. So I think, don't be bold. Don't be afraid to take risks, because that becomes harder the older you get. So that's my advice for young people today.
That's well taken. Take the risk while you're younger. Many thanks, Dr. Evanega. It's been an honor talking to you.
Thank
You're
you so
such a
much, Joseph.
visionary uh, business executive, academic, policy influencer, and science communicator. And as mentioned, you've inspired so many people across the world. And I know that young people and the planet generally can continue to count on you to play your part in helping ensure improved nutritional and food security and help make the world a better place. So it's been nice having a conversation with you.
Always a pleasure. Thank you so much, Joseph. And thanks to the CAST team.
I will go ahead and hand over back to Carlos then.
Well, thank you so much, guys. A big thank you to Sarah and Joseph for great job, and thank you for sharing your insights and comments. And thank to everyone who joined and participated. Just make sure you follow us on social media and at Guest Egg Science, and go to our website to get more information about our more recent publications and about membership. Uh, just a reminder, if you're a student memberships are free, and individual memberships start at just $35. So I wish you all a wonderful Christmas and New Year. We have a lot of exciting projects planned for 2025, so stay tuned. We appreciate your support, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.